down and listen to records. Smell the cover, read all the verses. Tell me about your favorites on Vinyl and Vision.
Hey folks, thanks for joining me for the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. Here we are with episode 130. Today's very special guest is Kelly Catlin. This is a little bit of a different episode. Kelly Catlin is an author. She's a writer. She's a freelance writer for the most part. She kind of writes for a number of different publications. And she is a now published author. She has written her first book, which is a biography, and it's called Kurt Cobain, Forever in Bloom. So obviously, the topic of the book is Kurt Cobain, and that is what we're here to discuss, really. Her book, I'm not trying to speculate on Kurt Cobain's life at all. And as a matter of fact, she doesn't speculate on Kurt Cobain's life either, really. She only kind of deals with what she has been taught and learned about through her research for this book, which kind of consists of a number of interviews, over 30. I don't know the exact number, but I know it's over 30. People that were very close to Kurt Cobain and who have, were either very good friends, bandmates, people that have played with him, people that have toured with him, and so forth. So there's a lot of very personal, detailed accounts of these people's interactions with him, and just giving a better and kind of interesting perspective on who he was as a person. Because, that might be, I think that's probably the thing that lacks in the media landscape about Kurt Cobain currently. Because we all understand the bullet points of his life, the tragedy that was his life, ending it so shortly at 27, self-inflicted, and the drug abuse and so forth. And so those are not I guess those things are mentioned in the book, but it's not the focal point. It's not like she was trying to dig into discovering more about the days that he went missing and so forth before his untimely death and stuff like that. It's not like that. It's not this conspiracy-minded thing. It's really humanizing a person and humanizing the experience. And it really is. Kelly has her heart in a very good place where she wrote this book because of her own personal experiences, losing a family member to suicide, and that kind of sparked the inspiration to delve into Kurt Cobain's life and kind of put these things together and, try to write something that will bring more attention to mental health awareness for, obviously for selves and for others. So she provides resources, and actually 50% of the proceeds of this book are going towards multiple charities. I don't have that list in front of me, so I'm not going to try to recall any of those, but you can visit her website, which I will provide links in the show notes, and there's the entire list there, and it's extensive. So I really encourage you guys to pick up the book. It's a very good and easy read. It's almost 500 pages, but it's a super easy read. As a fan of Nirvana for many, many years, I mean, it's kind of like this breath of fresh air to just kind of like get this different perspective on his life and kind of get to know who he was, really, because we don't really know that. So pick up the book. Links will be provided in the show notes, and I hope you like the conversation. And if you do, just please do all the things you do with the internet: like, share, subscribe, comment, rate, review, all of those things. They all help immensely, and we really much appreciate it. And if you care to help us out in a financial way, we can always go to my website, psychicstatic.net, and make a purchase of anything that's there. It all helps. Thank you very much, folks. Enjoy.
It was so nice to just kind of hear some of these things come from you and just kind of like very organically. And that's kind of basically what I wanted to try to get to today, was just trying to have a very candid conversation with you about the subject, because it's just important to me, I feel. And I feel like, the people that listen to this show probably have a pretty similar, story to mine in reference to, being a fan of Kurt Cobain's and having, a lot of love, respect, and admiration for the guy, despite not really ever having known him.
That's where I'm at. I mean, I knew nothing coming into this, and now I'm like, that's someone I completely admire and respect as a
Yeah.
human, as a musician. I mean, I learned more about him as a human than as the Nirvana frontman. So just looking at like his ethos as a person, I think to myself, that really sucks that he was someone I never got to meet, because you feel like you know him from like these experiences that his friends are telling you, and it's just
Mm,
it's really terrible that he didn't see the same value in his life that so many other people saw in it. So
right. Yeah. Well, that's the tricky thing about people that commit suicide is that you kind of necessarily you can't necessarily see the writing on the wall with where they feel they are in their lives, and
we
the
never
you.
saw it coming with Walter. Nope.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and we'll get to that. But before we start really getting into this, can I just say something? I was saying how I'm a little nervous, but I'm also, I guess a little bit of the nerves is that I don't want to come off rude or condescending to you.
That's
Okay?
okay.
I mean, but like I just want you to know that from a from a genuine place, as a fan of Kurt Cobain's and so forth. I mean, I have a lot of questions. I'm very inquisitive as to what you've learned and what your opinions are. But I also have my own opinions, and maybe depending on how this conversation goes, I might throw some of those out there, and I don't want you to think that I'm like trying to catch you in anything.
No, don't worry, don't worry. And I get nervous too because like the big thing for me going into this is people assume that I was this big fan and I knew all this stuff about him. And sometimes people ask me questions and I'm like, oh, I'm not trying to sound like uninformed or like I didn't do my research, but I went in blank slate. Like
Mm,
seriously, like if someone said like, what did you know about him before? I'd be like, I knew he had blonde hair and I knew he had blue eyes and I knew he was the lead singer of Nirvana. Like I knew really surface stuff. So, and
yeah,
I still, all my research was from people, like my own interviews. So I didn't
right.
read any about him or anything. So it's tough because if I didn't talk about it with somebody, I might not know it. So I'll do my best to
Mhm.
sound knowledgeable.
No, 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 that's okay. I mean, like, I've read a good portion of your book. I have not been able to get through it. Unfortunately, I've only had a few days, and I've did my best to kind of like, hit all the points, especially the ones that you mentioned that would be pretty useful to me as far as this conversation goes, and just wasn't able to do it all. It's just
It's a beast of a book.
Well, I mean, first of all, it was a good and easy read, which is good for me because I am like, I'm not a good reader. I'm
Me
very
too.
illiterate for the most part, and the topic obviously is fascinating to me, and the way that you not pitch the book, but the angles that you are coming
Oh,
from are
yeah, love
are
in it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're interesting because it's kind of not an angle or a perspective that has been shed much light upon Kurt's life, I don't feel.
I was surprised to learn that through it because knowing really nothing about him coming into this, not having read other books, I was just like, well, this is what I want to do. And, if there's things like that out there in existing literature, then it's just going to be my opinion. And then as I started to talk to people and some people, like some of his friends, would help me with the book and read it, I started hearing like, this is a new angle you're taking. And I was like, you know what? It was the angle that I was interested in. I also wanted the book to be an easy read because I'm a terrible reader. I think people assume because I write that I must read like 5 books a week. I'm like, I have like
Hmm.
3 books that are my favorite books, and I reread them every year, and that's basically it.
Hmm.
I'm not a good.
Let's start there. What are your
Okay,
favorite books?
I don't even want to tell you. I like cheesy romance novels. I don't know why.
Really? Wow,
Yeah,
okay.
I find that they help me kind of escape. Um, After working 2 years, well, it's been over 2 years at this point, um, writing a book about suicide, it's so heavy. It's such
Hmm.
a heavy topic that, and I'm not just approaching it like somebody who's just casually interested in mental health. I'm approaching it from a topic of, we lost a loved one, Walter, to suicide. So for me, it was a very heavy topic. It kind of reminded me almost of like what method actors might go through when they really, put themselves into a role.
Hmm.
And couldn't do anything heavy outside of this book. Like if someone was like, "Oh, did you see this new, docu-series on TV that tackles insert whatever really pressing topic?" I was like, "No, I probably watched Is It Cake?" Like I had to watch silly shows. I had to read kind of lighthearted books because it was just too depressing to be in that mindset 24/7. Like you have to
Yeah,
separate.
sure.
Yeah. It's too
Disengage, just kind of like decompress.
well, I mean, if you read part of the book, you'll see it's a different slant on all things Kurt Cobain, but it's there's still like heavy conversations that I'm having with people, and they all
Hmm.
have the same theme, which is this was what made Kurt so great. This is why we loved him, and his suicide really,
Sure.
affected us, Y and Z. So that's tough to continuously have that conversation with people over and over because you're
Yeah,
hearing the pain, but then they obviously want to know about your trauma and why you wrote the book. So I'm talking about,
sure.
well, and it was just heavy. It was a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're getting that personal connection from these people that you were speaking with in regards to the book. People that knew him, knew Kurt Cobain personally, and that's, not a lot of people got to know him, especially, now that's been 30 plus years since his death. Um, that's a very interesting position to have to have these conversations, and obviously coming from a sympathetic position yourself, where you lost somebody important to you as well. So, I can imagine how difficult it was overall. A lot of reasons why it might be difficult, and we'll get there.
Yeah, sure.
Um, so when I do these shows, the first thing I usually do is I usually kind of get a background on the person that I'm speaking with, regardless of whether I know them or not. So let's just start there because I'm very interested in learning more about you yourself. So one of the first things that caught my attention was that you said that you are not a Nirvana fan, or were not a Nirvana fan, really. So let's go back to 1991. Where are you in 1991?
Uh, third grade.
Yeah, so you're a kid.
Yeah, I was young. Probably being handed like, a Michael Jackson. Oh my God, well, wait. I think my parents had given me at some point the Back to the Future official soundtrack cassette.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like this is good music for you. In
Sure.
third. Um, I remember I want to say I may have been in fourth grade, and I remember my dad, because my parents are divorced. And I remember my dad bringing over the Nevermind cassette tape, and I just remember, the baby on the front cover chasing
Hmm.
the dollar bill, and I remember my mom kind of grabbing it, like she's only 9, she can't listen to this. I remember that. Here's some Rod Stewart.
Wow.
So
No
yeah,
mention of the baby penis. It's all
no.
all she can't hear this.
Yeah, it was just no. I remember my mom kind of like grabbed the cassette tape. She's too young.
Mm.
Um, but obviously at that point, your interest is kind of like peaked and you're like, okay, so there's this band that my parents don't want me, well, one parent doesn't want me listening to yet, and I remember the following year, I was in fifth grade at this point, being at a babysitter's house. And she lived right across the street. My mom just didn't want me home alone after school after getting off the bus. And I remember her son came home, and I remember he walked into the room where all the kids were, and he looked at his mom, our babysitter, and he said, Kurt Cobain died. He
Mm.
he killed himself. And I didn't really know who he was, but I knew that this was something significant. I understood that, and this was something significant. People, I saw these people were visibly rattled around me by this suicide, and I just remember that. I remember where I was. I remember where I was sitting. It's like one of those things that just stood out in my mind, despite, at my age not being interested in the band. And then,
Mm.
I mean, fast forward to high school, I still wasn't into them. I had friends that were, oh my God, Nirvana was their whole existence. You know what I mean? But I still
Yeah.
had all the CDs because my dad used to just keep buying them for me, like convinced to turn me on to good music. Uh, but I still hadn't. So, but I remember that was my first like inclination to who they were and why this was an important part of, history when he had
Yeah.
passed in 94.
Right. Fifth grade you were in. So well, what were you listening to as a kid? Like what were you listening to growing up?
Feel like I don't want to say it out loud.
It's
Um,
okay.
I remember I used to listen to Ace of Base and The Real McCoy. That was like,
Mm.
real cool in fifth grade.
Yeah.
Um, in high school, I got really turned on to Silverchair. I've always been a big fan of Daniel Johns. Just something about him. He was always very vocal about the fact that he battled anorexia. And
Mm.
I always respected that he was so vocal speaking about that and that it came from the stress of being this big music icon at such a young age. And I always liked that he was very honest and had a lot of candor with the things that he spoke about with his music. So I really liked Silverchair a lot growing up, and I was like a big Rod Stewart fan too. It was like a thing with my mom and I. We used to kind of bond over our shared
Mm.
love of Rod Stewart. We used to go to a ton of Rod Stewart concerts.
Did
um
did you like Faces at all?
I no, I think my mom and I used to just listen to his he had this compilation album that he had put out. It was like the best of. So I knew
Mm.
his
Okay.
like hits.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think I'm sexy? All that stuff. Yeah, yeah. Was it?
Yeah.
I forget the name of that song.
And then we had seen him we saw him a few times in concert. Um but that was it. I mean, I was kind of like one dimensional in high school with music. It was like whatever pop stuff was on the radio, I might listen to also. It's
Mm.
funny that I went on to write a book like this because it's not that I didn't love music. I just never really followed any one band too closely.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
you
you
know what
did
I
love music, obviously, because one other thing I want to get to is that you actually are a musician,
yeah. But I
and
like
you.
doing my own stuff. I like writing my own stuff and
Well,
playing an original.
when did that start happening?
I think I was about 24. I'll be 42 this year. So I was about 24. Um, I did a couple cover bands and it was fun, but it wasn't the kind of creative outlet that I was looking for personally.
Hmm.
And I had met up with some other kids, other musicians, and they were like, "We have a band. It's all originals. Like, why don't you want to try see and I did, and I auditioned, and I it was like that cool camaraderie of being in a band. I remember we were all standing around in the driveway afterwards, and I kind of jokingly said, like, so did I get it, am I in, just like joking, like I didn't really want to put them on the spot, and they're like, yeah, no, absolutely. And that was it. It was just buddies after that, and we had a great time just kind of
Hmm.
recording different things and messing around in the garage. But I found that that was a neat outlet because I always liked to write, but I never thought it was going to be a book. So I did all the lyrics for the band, and I just thought it was a really nice, creative, like expressive way of
Hmm.
kind of whether I was venting my frustrations or just, oh, this happened, and what do I do with it? I'm going to turn it into a song.
Right.
So for a few years, everything was just the band and our original music, which we really didn't do much with, but we had
Well,
fun.
yeah. I mean, it happens. I mean, like, I don't know. Everyone has a. I feel like so many people are in bands these days. I mean, and especially maybe our generation where, teens to 20 somethings, late 90s, early 2000s, it felt like everybody was in a band.
Yeah, it did. It was
Yeah.
like the thing to do. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
the thing. If you weren't in a band, you had to be friends with someone in a band, and you could be their roadie, which was really
Mm.
just hanging out and practice. So,
Right, right. So you play guitar and you sing.
yeah, I primarily sing. I mean, I play guitar, but I don't play well. I'm mostly like all power chords. So,
That's okay. I mean, Kurt could say the same.
yeah, I can't like name notes or anything like that. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'm mostly a power chord person.
That's okay. So, I mean, you're saying college, so this is.
But this was right after I had graduated. So I graduated, and then remember, it was my first teaching job because I used to be a teacher. It was my first teaching job, and I think it was my second year teaching, second or third year teaching, was when I joined the original band. So yeah, it was about 2009, I think. I hate looking that far back because then I have to realize how
Yeah,
many that was.
that's okay. Well, so that's interesting. So, I mean, like, because as far as playing music is concerned, I mean, that's a little late. I mean,
Yeah.
so as a kid growing up, you kind of had this mostly mainstream music, kind of pop music kind of background. That's what you really liked for the most part. You didn't really like Nirvana. Um,
I mean, wouldn't turn the radio station if their stuff was on. You know what I mean?
sure,
Like,
sure. No, I'm not saying that you didn't like them at all. I'm just saying that it wasn't what I've noticed or what I've been thinking about the past couple of days is like, isn't it strange or isn't it funny how like most of the friends that you kind of revolve around, the kind of inside of your circle, maybe a lot of that comes from like the music that you guys share together. Because I mean, for me, like as a teenager growing up, I mean, like I kind of got into rock music as as early as I can remember, really. I remember my dad having some tapes in the house of like, Supertramp and Led Zeppelin and The Clash and yeah, so I mean like but then like everyone I've ever met since, it's just like they had to have some knowledge of and like rock music of some sort and want to show me things, want to like teach me about whatever else. And so the progression has been from a teenager to now just people that I meet that are just like, oh, have you heard this? Have you heard this? You should listen to this. If you like this, you're gonna like this. And so that's what my friends revolve around now. And that's why all of my friends now are musicians and artists and so forth, because all of them like music that I really respect and like.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, so did you didn't have any of that, do you feel, or like, I mean, like up until your 20s when you're in, kind of getting out of college and starting this band.
My friends listen to so many very different genres of music. Like I had, really close friend growing up who was just, we used to call him the Kurt Cobain addict because anything, I mean, it was Kurt Cobain this and Kurt Cobain that, and it was all he would ever talk about. Um, but for me, I also had friends that, would listen to hip hop and R&B or rap, or it was always because I'm an only child. So, my mom and I have always been very close, and she loves David Bowie, so I listen to David Bowie with her. But
Hmm.
I never really got into like any one thing, but I would just always like, no matter who I was hanging around with, like I'd have one group that would always have like, Marilyn Manson on, or then you'd have the group that just like movie scores. So for me, I kind of got into that too. I did start to listen to a lot of movie scores. Like I would just
Hmm.
like that kind of eclectic, like, oh, I like the Crow soundtrack because it's got, The Cure on it and it's got, Nine Inch Nails on it. So I would have those kind of pockets of things. Um, but it's so weird because I never really got into any one specific band, although I appreciate, all different kinds of music until this book. So it's just it's strange. I've always been more like a casual music listener, I think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. And I know for the people in my life, like I threw a lot of people for a loop when I was like, I'm gonna write a book and it's gonna be a music book and it's gonna be about Kurt Cobain because I got those are three things I've never heard you really express interest in wanting to do. So
Huh.
the only I never describe it because my publisher, I love my publisher. Everybody there is fantastic. They've asked me about this too. And I've told them the best way I can ever describe this is it was one of these things like you ever just feel like you're supposed to do something and you can't put your finger on it and you don't know why or what's driving you to do something, what's leading you to do something, but you feel like at that specific moment in your life, this is what you're supposed to do. That's
Hmm.
just how I feel about the book. And
Yeah.
I wanted to learn everything and anything about Kurt Cobain because I was moved by his story when I started to learn about him. And that made me kind of like reopen this appreciation for music. And when I was learning about, the underpinnings of Nirvana and how the band started, and I was talking to Ryan Agner, who's regarded as their first manager, and he'll tell you this too, he was never really their manager. We were talking about it and we were on the phone one night and we were chatting and he was asking how my band got started back in 2009. And I said, well, basically, I said it was just, a group of friends. I said, and they used to kind of screw around and they made original songs. I said, and there was our one friend who wanted to play bass but didn't know how to play bass. And we were like, well, just get a bass and we'll just figure it out. And that was our band. And Ryan said to me, he goes, that was Nirvana. Like that was how the whole thing just kind of came to be. You just get some people together who want to play music and want to have fun. So
Hmm.
me, what was neat was learning all these things about Kurt Cobain and Nirvana and seeing a lot of the parallels. And that kind of really ignited this interest for me and really learning everything about Nirvana and what went into really creating, that band and the tenacity and the determination and just this whole new found respect for musicians and people who put, themselves out there. Even the interview process, whether I was talking to Gary Lee Conner from the Screaming Trees or Kurt Danielson from Tad or, Danny Goldberg, who did this has had this amazing career, or indie artists who were inspired by Kurt Cobain, and you've watched these people basically put, their hearts on their sleeve to make this dream a reality. It's just it made
Hmm.
me really think about how something like a garage band that I was in, how people take that and turn it into these incredible careers. It was just a wild experience. I just have such a new appreciation for anybody who wants to pursue their dreams, musicians, artists, anybody. I just think it's really neat.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
Well, you're
feel like
doing that now. Different
I feel
medium, but it's the same thing. I mean, like, kind of delving wholeheartedly into a process and figuring it out from kind of the ground up for the most part, except for the fact that you actually have been or and are a music columnist, correct?
Yeah, I write for Mixdown.
Mm.
And what I do is I review just different music albums basically. And that was actually not like the reason why I wrote the book, but it was kind of how I got the idea for wanting to bring in indie artists. So what they do is, they send me music and I listen to it and I review it basically. I'll be listening to an album sometime and I'll be like, is that what do I hear in that in the background? Like, yeah, I'll try to pinpoint like what instrument it is, and maybe I'll go do a little research, like, okay, it sounds like this. But I thought, hey, for some of these artists, like, why not reach out to them and like ask them, hey, what was that instrument? Like, I'm covering your album. Like, can you tell me what went into like creating it, or just
Sure.
different questions that I have. And when I was talking to a couple people, because you're curious, like, hey, what made you want to become a musician? And people start sharing their stories with you, and a lot of them come from a place of maybe it was growing up in a fractured home, or living with substance abuse, and needing to find your way forward. I did notice there was a theme, and it was Kurt Cobain.
Hmm.
And really like Nirvana, and listening to Nirvana's music got me through a really dark time. I really respected, this and that about, Kurt Cobain that helped me overcome bullying in high school. I would hear that come up as a theme. Um, and then I started thinking, I was talking to another writer friend of mine, and I was like, I think I need to do something with this book where it really needs to focus on his legacy.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about the people that are interviewed up and down. I'm talking about the other artists, because there's so many incredible artists out there that we don't get to experience, How did Nirvana's music, how did Kurt Cobain's ethos, that message affect these people on such a profound level that they were like, that's it. This is what I'm doing. I found my calling. To me, I think that's just, they were such beautiful stories that I heard.
Hmm.
Um, like, one person who never met Kurt Cobain, but, became a musician because of him, said that Kurt Cobain was, quote unquote, like a surrogate father to him from never having met him, but
Hmm.
just felt like a surrogate father because he said his own father's not in his life.
Sure.
And I thought, like, I mean, I know special isn't like a word that does it justice, but I just thought that was really, these are powerful sentiments from these people.
Yeah.
So I don't know, all those kind of stories, like I said, were just kind of like the driving force, and kind of inform like how I wanted this book to sound. And that's why it does read kind of, I tried to make it smooth, but it's a little not like erratic, but some people ask like how do you jump from Nirvana's management to a writer in Australia? Like what is what are the connections?
Hmm.
And like artistry, just artistry and tenacity, and how something about Kurt Cobain affected all these people. Because I thought that was like really the best way to showcase, I think, his legacy is not just the people we know he affected, but really the far reach that he's still got to this day, just making people, I think, have confidence in themselves. So I tried to
Yeah.
have have that theme in the book.
Okay. I mean, an important thing to tackle, I guess. I mean, like in my older age, I guess I've been able to kind of like, parse it out where I can kind of compare him to Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground in the sense that he is of a newer generation, but what he ended up creating ended up inspiring a whole new generation of people that wanted to follow in his footsteps and take his model and do their own thing from it. I mean, like I don't know if you are familiar with that expression or that saying where Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground's first album was not a successful album, but the 6,000 people that bought that record when it first came out all went on to start bands.
And that to me is how you measure success.
Sure, sure. But it's a similar in a similar regard that like this influential person who just wrote this very genuine music from a very kind of like personal place was able to resonate and touch people for generations now just by just doing what came natural to them, really.
I think that's incredible. Like I said, the stories that I heard, and there's this one band in particular. So Jason Everman, do you follow he's in a new band now. It's called Silence and Light.
Mm.
Um,
No,
it,
I
it,
don't know it.
it's all military veterans. And they give a portion of their profits to charity. I mean, this is I think they're great with the message that they want to get out there. And Jason and I had tried to connect for the book, but he does a lot of charity work, and I think that's incredible. And he was off the grid a lot. So a bandmate of his, Brad Thomas, who's awesome, super nice guy. He did an interview, and he was a former Delta Force, and Walter, who I wrote the book for, was a veteran Marine. So I wanted
Mhm.
to have everything kind of, come together in the book with having all these different, people and musicians that I interviewed. And Brad was telling me about how him and Jason came to get the idea to start Silence and Light, and how they decided that they were going to use it for donations, like to try to help out. They both do a ton of volunteer work. Um, the message they try to get across to kind of help people. And it's just, I don't know, to me it was neat. Like you see people walking down the street with, a Nirvana t-shirt on, or you hear them on, the radio or something like that. But when you really start talking to people and see like, okay, this is more than a brand to someone. This is more than a smiley face t-shirt. This is more than something you'll hear on a local radio station. This is a band that was influential, that inspired other people to do the thing that they loved. I don't know, like I said, just I can arguably say like Nirvana is my favorite band now. Like they're
Mhm.
awesome. Like and I'm
Yeah.
still learning because I'm so tardy to the party. Like I wish like when my dad had slipped me that CD in fourth grade that I'd have been like, I'm not listening to the Back to the Future soundtrack anymore. Like I've got good stuff now.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like
Well, that's funny too. I mean, like, Kurt Cobain, from what I understand, from what I know, I've done a lot of research on him too, just for doing this show and having spoken about a couple of his albums. Um, he was an admirer or at least an appreciator of like pop music as well. I mean, he loved the Beatles, and I'm sure if you were able to ask him, there would be a number of like, kind of like maybe dirty secrets of like pop music that he really appreciated and liked because he wrote pop music himself to a degree.
I 100% agree. I think he liked ABBA, right? Like I think
Dude,
he
their first record is a fucking rock record. Have you listened to ABBA's first record?
I will now though. I
It's a
will now.
fucking rock record. I was just like, I was surprised. I was like, whoa, this is ABBA?
Because all I think is Dancing Queen. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean those
um
are great too. But I mean, but like bands also have their eras and their genres and shit too, like if you really start to deep dive into like, some artists, it's like you might never even think. It's just like, whoa, why did they sound like this or when did they sound like this?
yeah.
Um, well, maybe we should talk about this book for a little bit. I'm really disappointed that I have not been able to read the whole thing. I'm actually really interested in getting to the end of this book because it's from what I've read so far, it's pretty great. You really have taken no shortcuts. It's a very detailed book. I actually even like the fact that you in some circumstances have gone to the details of like um, describing the instrument that Kurt was using at the time. Like, obviously you were describing one of the shows that he was playing,
Reading
but
92.
1992 Reading, did you say? Yeah.
Obsessed over that one. I'm one of these people, I get kind of like obsessed in the fine details, like you know what I mean? And when I was writing it, I was watching Reading 92, and I just found it fascinating every time he would switch up a guitar. I don't know why. I wanted to know. And I
Hmm.
wanted to know what guitar he had on. But then I got more into like the details. I wanted to know the neck on the guitar, the headstock on the guitar. And I got into that. But I didn't want to just say that because I saw it somewhere. I wanted to be on I went on all these different forums to like check it out. And I don't mean just like somebody quoted. I mean like I wanted to know the guitar tech who was there, like put his stamp on that bit of knowledge. Like I did, like if somebody said it on Reddit, I was like, that's thanks for the tip, but I'm gonna go like double check that.
Right.
Um, I just like stuff like that. My whole goal was, I'm doing a book like this, right? And it's interview heavy, and that's why I say it's an easy read because if you see the book, it looks like a telephone book. It's a big book, you know. And I'm
Hmm.
like, no, I don't think it's going to take you forever to read. I'm like, it's just a quick read because it's interviews. So since I went into this blind, knowing nothing about the band, right? Because if you're reading the book, you'll see it kind of reads like my journey to learn about him. Like, and this person told me to call this person, and da 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 da.
Right.
So as I'm talking to one person, I'm talking to Tony, the interpretive dancer, who was Nirvana's stage dancer, and we're talking about Reading 92, and I'm like, I'm gonna go watch Reading 92 1,000 times because I want to learn all about this. I want to learn about what Kurt had going on in his personal life and how all these different magazines and tabloids were kind of really taking a lot of pot shots at him. That kind of led him to the whole thing where, he comes out and he's got the wig on and he's got the hospital gown and he's got, Everett True pushes him out in the wheelchair and all these things. And when I was doing that, I wanted to make those concert chapters this completely immersive experience where maybe the reader is, reading the book and you're hearing these stories and you're hearing Tony the interpretive dancer, tell his time about Reading 92. And then I wanted to describe Reading 92 in such a vivid detail that hopefully somebody like me who has a hard time getting into books could read it and be
Hmm.
like, I felt like I was there, and
Hmm.
then because I split it up. So I have Tony's chapter and then I have half of Reading 92. And then I go right into Charles Peterson's chapter because he was also at Reading 92. And then after Charles Peterson, I do the second half of Reading 92. And then it, kind of like I go through the rest of the book with other interviews. Because I
Yeah.
do the same Cow Palace and the end of the book is Unplugged in New York.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
um,
Yeah, I haven't gotten that far yet, but yeah, it sounds totally interesting. I mean, I'm definitely interested in digging into it further. Um, one of the first points that I kind of got to was early on in the book. I pretty much started at that beginning. But in the book so far, I mean, you painted this picture of his hometown in Aberdeen, and what growing up must have been like there for him, and wondering if maybe fans over the decades have made these pilgrimages to find these answers or to make these connections to him and so forth. And I don't know. I mean, were you able to do that yourself? Did you end up actually going to Aberdeen and kind of walking these paths at all?
no, I want to. I'm always embarrassed to say this out loud, but I'm really afraid to fly.
Hmm.
So that's kind of I've talked to my husband. I'm like, what about taking a train? He's like, from the East Coast.
Yeah. Super expensive, long time. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to like work up the nerve because I really want to do go out there because you spend so much time writing about this town because I didn't want to pretend to like know anything or understand anything, which is why I wanted to bring some people in from Aberdeen. You do hear me. So if you've read one of the chapters, I brought in a local proprietor, Curtis Thorfinson. He's the one that owns the Tangerine Tree in
Hmm.
Aberdeen. Their record store out there. And Curtis is a photographer too. He's wonderful. He's been such a huge help from day one with this project. And living in Aberdeen, he was able to kind of walk me through some things. Can you tell me, what's the town like? Can you tell me like local goings on? Like what has the town done to, honor Kurt Cobain? What's it like in terms of tourism? Those kind of things. Because
Hmm.
you want to try to envision these things. And even him going, he would go to the bridge in the park and take pictures. So I could kind of see, like, okay, this is what it looks like. But I mean, but it was neat learning about the town from people there. And there's really a very rich music community in Aberdeen.
Hmm.
There are all kinds of things going on, out there right now. I mean, it's the birthplace of Kurt Cobain, and but not even just like the things that they have, for people like they have World Music Day, they have museums and stuff like this. Um, it's just what being at his old stomping grounds represent to people. It's overwhelming how much he meant to so many people, and then just going to this bridge or this park, the Kurt Cobain Memorial Park, really is so impactful for so many people.
Sure, sure it is. I mean, and kind of going back to the idea of Aberdeen and like how you write about it in the book, you write about how influential it must have been on him for a number of factors. And, considering on this show, I usually speak to a person about an album, which is influential to them and like how that kind of affected them going forward and creating what they create. I mean, like I can appreciate that something like that, like just your geographical location also has an effect. Like there are a number of things that have an effect on who you are and how and like who you become and kind of what you create. But so can you tell me about where you grew up?
Oh, sure, absolutely. New Jersey, born and raised, don't get to
Oh,
leave too often. A lot of that's because I don't like flying.
okay.
I mean, we go places if we can drive there.
Sure.
Um, but I mean, for me, I mean, I didn't grow up in like a super small town or anything, and pretty early on, we moved to a more built up, populated part of the state. We were down at the shore, my family and I went to college down there. And that to me, you get to see a lot of when you're in a more built up area. I mean, at least this was my experience. When you're in a more built up area, you get turned on to a lot more like local musicians, especially like growing up at the Jersey Shore.
Hmm.
I moved down there after high school, but there was so many more people at the shore. It was this total melting pot. And that was when I got really turned on to different like local bands. And you couldn't go to a party or a club or something without someone being like, I'm in a band, I'm in a band. It was like mind blowing for me. Like
Hmm.
I went from high school where you just never heard that to college where it was everywhere and it was so many different kinds of music. And you could go anywhere and there was live music, and I just wasn't used to that growing up.
Hmm.
Um, I just thought that was really cool watching these bands get out there and perform and play. Um, and that was why when I went to college, still at the shore, I wanted to do something, but at the time, like being in a band still wasn't really on my like radar. It hadn't registered. And that was when I was, at my school and they had a radio station and I went and I auditioned for it and I, got a slot and I started going to the Stone Pony to see a lot of these local bands play, and I thought it was fun. I would interview them or I would bring them back to the radio station and we would do live interviews. And it was really neat learning about all just this, like I said, this rich vibrant music scene at the Jersey Shore, but I didn't get really turned on to it until college.
Yeah.
So
Okay. And so, and when did you, so what did you study in college?
special education.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
that you'd never studied any kind of writing.
No, which I do have a background in English in that I just always like to write. And it was so weird because when I was writing this book, like I said, there were so many parallels. I remember learning about Kurt's journals. And I remember thinking back to when I was 15 and my dad came over and he handed me, this red spiral bound book. And it was from Rutgers. And it was just, just a notebook, an empty notebook, and I couldn't stop writing. And I remember that I was 15 and I remember it was, the summer and I just started writing.
Hmm.
And I'm going to sound so like nerdy, but I used to call it the trust fund. And every time I couldn't wait to fill a notebook so I could go get another journal. And I would call that one the trust fund. They all had like a little subtitle. And I just had so many of these books. And I did it for years. I probably did it for about 15 years. They were all called the trust fund. They all had like some little subtitle on them. And they were just, my musings and my thoughts and all these. And when I was learning about Kurt, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, we did the same thing. I used to have a tape recorder and I used to run around and make these like weird clips of different things. Or my friends and I would go out and film. Or I don't know. I mean, I'm sure
Hmm.
everybody brother like kind of did that, but it was still neat learning all those things about him. And you just you got the appeal of him. You know what I mean? You got why he appealed to so many people. He was just so normal.
Right, right. Well, I mean, that's kind of like the purpose of your book was to kind of like, normalize him and humanize him in a way that has not really been done. Not that I know of. I mean, like kind of like you, I haven't really read any of his books or biographies about him. I know I've read a few or a couple actually in order to do research for a couple of episodes that I've done about Bleach and about In Utero.
Yeah.
The Bleach one in particular, I feel like I've done the most research on, but that was also years ago. I really don't remember any of that stuff.
Oh,
Um,
Bigger Than Heaven, that's the big biography that
mhm.
people use. because then there's the Come As You Are by Michael Azerrad, but I think that's more like the band's book because
Sure.
that's Fauna. But yeah, the Heavier Than Heaven, that's the Cobain biography. I think that one came out a while ago. I think that came out in like 2004.
Okay.
Um, because the books get referenced a lot, like when you're doing interviews, people be like, "Oh, did you read such and such?" And I'm like, "No, but they're on my list to read." I'm like, "But doing anything until I'm done with the book."
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's also a great place to be because I mean, coming from a place where you decide to tackle a topic as big as Kurt Cobain, that you know, there's so many different like there's so many issues with trying to tackle a subject that large.
Yeah.
But so I can appreciate that, you weren't really a huge fan growing up. So it's not like you had this bias of like, like this is my favorite artist and, like I feel like he wasn't done right in the media and therefore I want to write this book because of, I want to shed more light on kind of who he was. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's just like this kind of like really great, genuine place of just kind of curiosity, and then obviously tying it into to the connection that you have made with having lost somebody to suicide as well. So, I mean, maybe I need you to t describe that process a little bit as far as just like, where, like, why you decided to try to tackle Kurt
Sure,
in relation to your family member Walter.
sure. It's funny, not funny. Like people will ask me all the time, like, how did this come to be? And I wish there was one succinct answer. So I'll try not to like, ramble on too much. But basically, I knew nothing about the band besides I had a couple friends growing up that were really into Nirvana, and I don't live under a rock, so I've heard Smells Like Teen Spirit. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
that was as much as I know. It was so Walter died in 2017. It was during the pandemic. So I want to say I think it was 2001. And I was out summer with my son and we came home, we were outside and my neighbor
20
was,
2021.
yeah, I think it was 2021. I'm
Okay.
trying to remember
No, it's
exactly
fine.
when, because I feel like the days blend after a while.
Sure.
Um, my neighbor was blasting Nirvana. And I was like, do you guys still listen to this? Like, come on, like what an old mom question to ask. You know what I mean? And he looks at me and he's like, yeah, of course we do. He was totally sweet about it. He was like, yeah, we listen to Nirvana. Thanks, mom. And I was like, no, but really? And he's like, yeah, we listen to the trees. We listen to it all. And I was like, now I'm old. Um,
Yeah.
so I went inside to go watch Matlock. No, I'm kidding. So I went inside with my son and we were baking cookies. And now Nirvana is in my head. And I'm like, I want to listen to Smells Like Teen Spirit. So my son goes and does his own thing. And I'm like, Alexa, play Smells Like Teen Spirit. It must have tripped something in my Google algorithm because I'm sitting on my phone and like you're doom scrolling through your news feed, but
Mm-hmm.
it's all Kurt Cobain stuff is coming up.
Mm.
And I felt that a lot of the articles had very similar taglines, which were all kind of along the lines of like a tortured artist. Gosh, I remember reading one at one point, and it was about one of his guitars that had gone to auction. This was at some point in the process, and it was like broken guitar of a broken musician. And you just kept seeing these same kind of similar tag phrases.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's like a week later, something like that, and I can't sleep, and I'm on HBO, and I see montage of Heck pop up, and
Okay.
I see, Kurt's face, and again, I know nothing about him. So I press play, and I'm watching this movie, and for somebody like me who has a hard time focusing on things, I really thought they did an excellent job of helping people stay really like engrossed and glued to the movie. Just the way the whole thing is filmed, I thought was brilliant. And I'm listening and I'm like, oh, who's narrating this? Because duh, I don't know anything really about him. And I Google it and it's Kurt Cobain. I'm like, how did they do that? And then that sent me down the rabbit hole where I learned about the montage of Hack Home recordings, and that the director Brett Morgan got the recordings from 1987 and 1994, and he used that and kind of, that's how he had Kurt narrating parts of the movie and all this stuff. And I just thought the whole thing was wild. And I say that word too much, but really beautiful.
Mm.
And the music was what got me the most too. It was really haunting, and I wanted to learn about the music. It's a few Nirvana songs completely reimagined, and they're childlike and they're dreamlike, and they use all kinds of, like at one point to create the music, they're banging on empty suitcases, and they've got stone marimbas and all these different like really incredible sounds redoing Nirvana's music. So I'm frustrated because I'm watching this movie and he seemed incredible, Kurt Cobain, just from what I'm learning from this movie. I'm kind of frustrated because I'm reading these things about him online and it's all really focusing on his depression instead of his happiness. And then I start doing a little bit of poking around to learn more about him, and I'm learning that he was this vocal feminist and he was an equal rights advocate. And I'm learning about when the band played Cow Palace and they raised $60,000, for Bosnian rape victims. And I'm learning about Mia Zapata of the Gits and how they played, the benefit show to help find her killer and all these things. And I'm thinking to myself, when I started doing just like, learning about the concerts and the shows that they played, and I'm doing all this from his interviews. I'm reading a lot of his interviews. I wanted to know what he had to say.
Hmm.
I was really surprised that his depression was at the forefront of conversation so much in the media. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So because that wasn't the things that I had taken away from any of his interviews. I mean, there's that wonderful website, Live Nirvana, and they have that incredible, archive of interviews. And I just read them, and they go back really far, like, into the 80s. And I'm just reading everything. And I just was so impressed with this young man and all the things that were coming out of his mouth. And really, you could tell how he felt so strongly about some things.
Hmm.
Um, so I reached out to Jeff Dana, who did the music for Montage of Heck. And Jeff is an incredible composer, and he's done the music for, like, the Boondock Saints movie. He had just gotten done, this is back when we had spoken, doing the music for Julia on HBO. Like he's awesome.
Hmm.
And I he was one of the first people that I told about this project, and I was like, your music really, inspired me when I was watching Montage of Heck. I was like, and just all these things I've been learning about Kurt. Um, and I told him a little bit about Walter, and I said, had Walter been famous, and even not having been famous, I don't want anyone to ever remember him for his depression. I don't want that to eclipse the person he was.
Hmm.
And I thought to myself, it just felt like such a disservice that this was how mainstream media chooses to remember Kurt Cobain, as this kind of tortured artist character, brooding and, depressed. And I'm not saying he didn't embody those qualities. I'm just saying that people can be more than one thing. You know what I
Sure.
mean? And it just didn't feel like there was much room and discussions about him for him to be anything besides that. And that was just my limited research.
Yeah.
And with the way I feel about mental health awareness, and having seen, a young person across the street from me blasting Nirvana, and maybe this is my bias, I don't know. I just felt it was doing people a disservice to only kind of be fed, like being fed one side of the story.
Hmm.
Um, People can be more than one thing.
Sure.
And, that was kind of the impetus for the whole thing. I told Jeff about the project, and, he was excited to be a part of it. And I'm super happy that he's in the book. I think he's chapter 16 when you get to him.
I think I
Um,
did actually. He was one of the chapters I got to read about.
he's cool because you've got this awesome composer who knows knows what's up with music, but also got to reimagine Nirvana's music for the official Kurt Cobain rock doc. Like, he just felt like the person I needed to speak to.
Hmm.
The reason I really wanted him in it was because you talk to so many people, or not, sorry, you read so many forums online, like Reddit or whatever, and people talk about, well, was Kurt talented? Wasn't Kurt talented? Well, he didn't know the pentatonic scale. Okay, but he played power chords and his stuff sounded good. And I'm like,
Yeah.
doesn't matter if the guy went to Juilliard or taught himself in his shed. Like, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, that's not what music is supposed to be about. So I was like, well, let's have Jeff Dana. Like, let's have Jeff weigh in. So I asked Jeff, I was like, was he talented? And Jeff's like, oh yeah, here's why.
Sure.
And I just thought that was a cool chapter to
Hmm.
add to. But yeah, that was kind of like the foundation of the book. Basically, I got kind of like this idea in my head. I knew nothing about Kurt Cobain. I feel very strongly about mental health. I
Hmm.
don't like and again, I know everything is up for, everything's opinion, but my opinion is I don't like pushing depressed narratives. I like trying to find positivity in things. I like trying to say, okay, this is what happened to a person, let's learn from it, instead of just say like writing another derivative book that would say that Kurt Cobain was just destined to join the 27 Club, because I don't subscribe to that notion.
Right.
Um the people I spoke to didn't subscribe to that notion. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
had a lot of people in the, like, the people that I talked to about that specifically. Like, I didn't bring that up to everyone, but a lot of people, when we talked about it, would say, I think I said to somebody, I was like, yeah, a lot of people think that Cobain was destined to die by his own hand. And one person was like, that's just a BS attitude, or,
Sure.
you know, just held on a little longer. So again, all these little conversations that I had just kind of paved the way for me wanting to do something different. That,
Yeah. Yeah.
how can,
Well, I think you managed to achieve that, which is great. Because it's I think from just as a Nirvana fan, I think that it's going to be insightful for people that want to get to know him better, because I think people do. I think people are genuinely curious about what his life was like, what he was like. And the narrative from mainstream media is very one-sided from the way you're describing it, and I agree with you. Um, there's one thing I want to just touch on, and this is what I was saying before at the very beginning, when I was saying like this kind of feels weird to me. Like, I love your stance where you want to bring attention to mental health awareness and so forth, because it's important, and from as an empath coming from an empathetic position, obviously that's the most important. And I agree with you. Though at the same time, when I was reading some of the bits of this book, one of the things that I kind of thought about, and this is my own cynicism. Like, I'm just a cynical, piece of shit person for the most part.
oh,
No, no, no. But I mean, like, I think one of the points was how maybe you had said something along the lines of like, what could we have done for him to like so that he didn't end up where he did.
yeah,
But at the same time, my weird cynic brain is saying, um, well, if all of these things didn't happen in his life, he wouldn't have been who he was, and he wouldn't have been able to write the music that he wrote, and so forth. Like, he wouldn't have lived the life he lived unless these things happen. It's kind of like, all of these things unfortunately are connected, as
yeah.
shitty as they may sound.
I think it's almost like a double-edged sword sometimes, because it's like I like to think that there's another way of looking at him, but I understand sometimes why people need him to have been a certain way. And really, that's all we do know him as, because it's
Hmm.
like, well, what could we have done differently for him, or what could be? And I'm not pointing the finger at anybody in his life, because I mean, he had been in and out of rehab, and he had tried 12-step programs and all these couple different things, and it sounded like a lot of people were just trying to save him from himself, but he was kind of maybe on that crash course to destruction. And it's like, what do you do, especially in a 1994 lens, 93 lens, 92 lens,
Mm.
um where it's not like today, where, and even today there's the stigma around suicide and mental health, you know what I mean? And then put yourself back 30 some odd years, or maybe people were less comfortable, you didn't have the internet with these available resources, because now you can click on a button, you can chat with somebody. It was just a different time, which is kind of like crazy when you think about it, because it really wasn't that long ago. Um, but I mean, I think all these experiences, like we talked about like Aberdeen and stuff like that too. And I think had he not grown up in a town that was more, socioeconomically like disadvantaged, had he not come from a fractured home, had he not witnessed pockets of, abuse where, his mother, I mean, as one of the stories goes, his mother was with somebody, who may have, been a domestic abuser. He saw all these things. And
Right.
it's kind of like that, he had to experience all these things to become who he was. And those experiences really set off like this huge ripple effect, because that's what I
Right.
try to focus on. Okay, so the Young Street Bridge, right? So I talk about that a lot in the book. And um my thought with that bridge is that it's very, Cobain is synonymous with that bridge in Aberdeen. And I think people go, because this is something that people were tasking me with, like, can you find out if he conclusively slept beneath it?
Right. I mean,
But
like, how would you even find out that information, or why does it matter either?
get my 8 ball out, my magic 8 ball out, and be like, does Kurt Cobain sleep beneath the bridge? All signs point to maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But people so And that was a question asked to me by a lot of people, and people get so bogged down with that one statement, and that's why it's a big thing in my book where I say to people, I say, look, it didn't matter if he did or did not sleep beneath the bridge. What it represents, that bridge represents, is that he was unhoused. And
Hmm.
that's something that people tend to like. I think people tend to forget what unhoused means. Like when I used to teach, I worked with a lot of disadvantaged kids, and I had some kids that were unhoused. And a lot of people tend to, oh, does that mean that, their parents are like have a tent or something and they're sleeping outside? I'm like, no, unhoused is a lack of, permanent residence. And we saw that Cobain struggled with that. And to me, that's what that bridge always represented, that tenacity and that, despite the odds stacked against him, despite, being unhoused and all these pockets of couch surfing and living with this relative or this friend or sleeping in a car, he was still able to take this childhood trauma, really, if you will. Because think about how young he was when he died, 27 years old, barely 27 years old. And you
Hmm.
think to yourself, he was able to have all this trauma that turned him into the person that he was. And he could have used that fame to be anybody. I mean, he could have been like, look, I grew up eating stolen food like so many other, people are forced to do. But he chose to use his platform for good. And I mean, it's sad because it's like he had to experience all those things, because had he not, I think, experienced all those things, I don't know if maybe he would have grown up to have wanted to be such a vocal feminist. You know what I mean? Because that's just what you learn from like his interviews. Because he's got these interviews where I grew up, he's talking about, the way that he heard women treated in Aberdeen and stuff like that. And while you
Right.
never want to think of a person, or especially a child, living through that, I think it's still incredible that he was able to take those things and still do something positive with it for the world, despite taking all that pain, I think, and internalizing it and having just those deep rooted issues that I don't think people knew how to get him out of,
Yeah.
and in a time
Right.
when the so huge, and it's like, what do you do? You're in the public eye. He seemed very, from my research, I'm very bothered by the way the media portrayed him. We saw that Vanity Fair article.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The child got taken from them, you know what I mean? She was returned almost right away, but still, like, I can't imagine being a sensitive sort like him that was so affected by the world. And now it's like everybody, is demanding their pound of flesh of you, basically. And now it's, causing issues with the nuclear family you finally created for yourself that you've wanted more than anything, you know?
Right. Right. I mean, because I didn't really have a question so much for you as I'm kind of like bringing up this point, just that he unfortunately wouldn't be the person that he is had he not gone through these traumatic experiences, and then that's unfortunate. And so like I was saying about my whole stupid cynical mind is that like, so I mean like, as much as we wanted or as much as we have would have wanted to help him, like and I'm saying like, in a kind of a pre kind of conceived way, like not like when he was famous and he was struggling with his drug addiction at his worst and ultimately in his final days. I'm saying like, even as far back as his childhood to kind of like nip this in the bud, like, to where the trouble was kind of first stemming from.
Wouldn't have Nirvana right
Well,
now, probably.
right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and so unfortunately these things kind of have to happen. But
Yeah.
I think that you're coming from a good place. You obviously are coming from a place where you want people to be helped. You want people to know that there is help if someone is going through these difficult times. So one thing I'd really like to touch on is that, because of your book and just kind of the happenstance of where we are at this very moment in time. I just recently had heard that speech that Chappelle Roan gave at the Grammys.
Oh yeah, I didn't hear it, but I think somebody asked me about it. I think somebody asked me about that podcast the other day too. I think I know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very interesting because it's I'm not a fan of hers. I don't really know any of her music at all. Though I did hear about her kind of like, kind of super fast rise to fame. Um, and the gist of it is essentially her kind of calling out her label, saying that, there needs to be more support given to artists as far as like, health benefits are concerned and so forth. And then also there was another recent interview with Ariana Grande. Also not a fan of Ariana Grande, but I listened to it because I'm interested in
Yeah,
what she
sure.
had to say. And finding more about of like, the human perspective of hers as opposed to
just
whatever I
in
do not understand about her pop stardom. So, and so one of the things that I found interesting that she had said was that she also kind of like was calling out her label for lack of support in a sense for emotional for mental wellness specifically because the problem with fame when you're trying to achieve it, which I mean, say whatever you want about people that are looking for fame, but the fact of the matter is that these labels sign you to a contract to exploit your talents and your abilities, and then there is nothing in the contract that states anything about how we can help you when you achieve fame because you are going to need help when you achieve fame.
I could see that 100%. You said that and you made me think of Steve Albini. He wrote something and I mentioned it in my book briefly. He wrote it in 1993, The Problem with Music.
Hmm.
And it's so timely. Now he focuses a lot more about the way musicians are compensated in this article. It's on
Right.
the Bachelor's website right now. It's I think it's the problem with music, not the yeah, it's the problem with music. He talks about like, okay, so here's all the moving parts that like, musicians deal with, and here's everybody, here's what it costs to produce an album. Here's you've got to pay the manager, you've got to pay the record label. And he basically breaks down what all of this costs, how much the record label gets, and how much the musicians get. And they're like in the red. I think it was like the I'm going to totally misquote this, but I think it was like the labels are getting a ton. And I think the musicians were getting, I think Steve said like less than if they worked at like, 7-Eleven or something like that. Like it was really appalling the numbers. And these are the people that the heart and soul of the music.
Right.
And he really breaks it down in such a way. And I have a ton of respect for Steve Albini. He's one of the people in my book. And
Hmm.
I just thought he was a nice person. But reading that, it was really like eye raising, like, oh my, you don't realize, you know what I mean, how little these musicians get compensated. And then you've got something like Music Cares, which is working to provide, uh, you know, um, aid for musicians, whether it's, medical assistance and things like that. And I remember that getting brought up in one of my interviews. Someone said to me, there is no health insurance for musicians. And because this was something that I tried to, a topic I tried to weave into the book. So I feel, and I'm really not trying to promote the book by saying this, but I really wanted the book to be for somebody who, obviously Cobain fans, but people who maybe not don't like him, but just care about the human experience.
Hmm.
Because I tried to use him for the vehicle for larger systemic issues, and one of them was being a lack of affordable health care, in the States.
Sure.
And to me, you hear, and I know they never really got an answer, for what Cobain's stomach issues were. Was it,
Right.
you've heard asthmatic, you've heard, was it IBS, was it IBD, was it stress, like, what was it? What were all these things? And to me, my takeaway from it was, did he start self-medicating with heroin due to a lack of affordable healthcare, having this undiagnosed stomach issue? Did he have Crohn's disease? Did he have ulcerative colitis? Like, what could it have been?
Hmm.
Um, and then that was just a topic I really wanted to focus on. Like I said, I talk about, him being unhoused. I talk about the unhoused crisis and all these things. And you know, you'll have people who maybe knew him who say, people tried to help him and he tried 12-step programs and he tried, he was in and out of rehab and things like that. Now, I never asked anybody this question, so it's just my own musings, but, and I don't know anything about what goes on inside of a rehab facility, but were they just focusing on detoxing him from heroin? Like I know when he was in the Exodus Recovery Center, the week before he died, I think he was only there what, 24 hours. Um,
Hmm.
you know, what kind of mental health efforts were in place for him? You go to, okay, so here's this kid for all intents and purposes, right? Like he grows up in this small Washington timber town. We know he comes from a tough, he's got a tough home life. Um, and I talk about this too, the divorce rates. His parents got divorced when he was 9, so that would have put that at 1976. So you're talking a time and a place where the divorce rates weren't what they are today. Also in a time and a place where by default the woman was awarded custody of the children. And we saw Kurt's mother, and again, I'm not trying to I don't pretend to understand what went through anybody's head. I'm just naming, stating the facts and stuff.
Sure.
During a time and place when the woman was traditionally awarded custody of the child, we saw her give full custody to Kurt's father. And I
Hmm.
can't imagine what that must have been like for him or felt like for him or what he must have had to endure at school, So, because we see in his interviews that he was very embarrassed by this, he was kind of ashamed by his home life.
Right.
And all these things really informed the person that he was. So, we see that his father gets remarried, and there's kind of that point of contention there with his stepmother, and there's stepchildren brought in, and then there's, new siblings and all this. And he's really at a very young age, taking care of himself. And I didn't want to, again, point a finger back accusation at anybody. So I did use Washington state law to kind of, that's a theme in my book. If I have an opinion, I try to back it up with either a fact, a statistic, or a quote from Kurt Cobain to kind of
Hmm.
like, I don't want to pretend to get in anybody's head. But I did talk about
Right.
what constitutes child abuse. You know what I mean? And part of the Washington state law would say that really an unhoused minor, we're walking a real, not even a gray area line anymore. Like that's falling under a 2024 lens. I don't know what it was in, the 70s and 80s, but in 2024, when I did that part of the book, having a kid that's under the age of 18, having nowhere to go falls under the umbrella of child abuse.
Right.
Um, you see all these things, and then you think to yourself, at what age did the stomach issue start? You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Right.
And he's got this from all what it sounded like was it was debilitating. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to think that you are at this juncture in your life, it's 90, say late 1991, early 1992, and your album is beating Michael Jackson, you know what I mean? And you are now, what, like 20, 24, 25 years old, and you're arguably the biggest rock star in the planet. I'm assuming his health probably wasn't at the forefront of conversation. And maybe that was him too. Maybe I don't know. I didn't know him. Maybe he wanted to just keep doing and going and playing. I mean, we do know that they canceled shows and stuff like this if he wasn't feeling up to it. But I did have some people who weren't in that scene who were musicians at the same time, but weren't part of that scene who would say to me in interviews things like, he was making a lot of people a lot of money. And it's hard at that point to want to cancel shows, to focus on someone getting better and feeling well. Again, I don't
Right.
have my own opinions on it because I wasn't there, but it seems like there's a lot of,
Right.
back and forth with that. I mean, when I did talk to people who knew him, it felt like a lot of people were trying to get him help, and he may have been a little bit more obstinate and just kind of wanted to keep doing, his own thing. Um,
Yeah.
and you think to yourself, like, how much money was this band making? And it's kind of mind blowing that for musicians in general, that health insurance doesn't just come with a contract. Like
Right. Right.
any industry. I still don't understand. I have a hard time understanding how health insurance and healthcare is treated like a privilege and not a right. Like that is something I just can't wrap my brain around.
Right.
Um, and it felt like he was just another victim, another product of that, probably from a very young age where he had to handle his issues on his own and how sad, like his physical, ailments on his own.
Right, right, yeah. No, I mean, and it's true. I mean, like, to think about, like a career job that supplies you benefits and so forth, and I have a menial job where I make a very, paltry annual income.
Can't be
Uh,
worse than either.
yeah, well, I mean, and it's nowhere near celebrity status. It's nowhere near that type of, money people talk about when they talk about someone in Kurt's position where he must have been making a lot. So it's very strange that's the thing. And I'm happy to know that like some artists are speaking out about this now to try to bring some attention to it and try to, you know, get a handle on this because it's true. I mean, like these corporations that are making so much money hand over fist on exploiting the artists, I mean, like it's kind of a tale old as time. I mean, like, Prince had his issues with his label and went through his moments of kind of protesting and obviously got into legal altercations with his label to try to get out of his contract. And that wasn't even, necessarily talking so much about not being given certain, benefits, and then, what's the best way to describe that? Support, you know, certain
Yeah,
supports in just to make your art,
yeah. I know what you mean, not just treating a person like a product or anything. I mean, I remember reading somewhere that I guess because of how well Nevermind did that by the time In Utero came out, Nirvana was kind of like allowed to do whatever they want, basically, and the label, would support it. I mean, I feel like when I had talked to Danny Goldberg and stuff, and he's super nice and he was super informative about things, and he was trying to explain to me about the breaks that the band did take, for Kurt, and that he did try the 12-step programs, and if like he just couldn't do a show or couldn't get through it like that, it was it. They canceled things for him. You know what I mean?
Mm,
They did what they needed to do. Because I remember saying to Danny, I said, if this was like too much for him and it was just, why didn't he just quit? Why didn't he just leave? You know what I mean? And I can't remember what he said. I know it's in my book, but I think it was just kind of something like, well, we did cancel shows for him and he did take breaks and stuff like that. But Kurt was a creative type. And I just got the impression from people that this really was what he wanted to do. So he would like take, for him specifically, he would take those little steps back if he wanted to do it. But being somebody who wanted to get out and create, I don't think he was ever going to completely, stop doing that, even though I think at that time his mental health really needed it. And you
yeah.
feel bad talking to people that are telling you about the ways that they tried to help him, and it was like he just couldn't seem to get out of his own way.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the position of an addict, right? I mean, like an addict can't get help unless they want to seek the
Yeah.
help.
It didn't seem like he wanted it, and that's what's
Right.
really, because you like as a parent, I can't wrap my brain around that. You look at the pictures of him with his daughter, and it's just awful that he couldn't. What Where must he have been mentally that he just couldn't, push himself? And I think to myself too, and this is something, again, opening that honest dialogue where I like to talk about addiction in the book. About Kurt Cobain's addiction, because I say, you wouldn't begrudge somebody if they had a physical ailment, if they broke their arm, if they had, diabetes or heart disease or something like that. So
Hmm.
why do we begrudge addicts? Why don't we want to talk about addiction from a compassionate lens? Like, this is a disease that someone is living with. How can we help
Right.
people?
Because
You
people
know what I
see
mean?
it as a choice. I mean, as much as you're saying it's a disease, I mean, like most people say, like, well, that's a choice that you make with your life.
Yeah. I think it's Susan Collins says it in the forward of my book. She was the vice president of A&R for Virgin Music. So she was Nirvana's music publisher. And gee, someone says that like once you try something, it's very hard to kind of get away from it.
Hmm.
And I don't know, I'm a total teetotaler. I don't smoke or drink. I've never tried anything, but I would hear these experiences from people in the book, who maybe did have struggle with addiction. And some people just saying that had he just held on a little bit longer and had, gotten over that hump, but he was young and he was impulsive, and it just felt like the perfect storm really working against him.
Mm.
So, I mean, really the whole thing was chaotic and frenzied, and that was why I wanted to write such a long book, because I felt so much happened in such a short amount of time for him that we really needed to take like a deep dive into it. Like, you would think a book this size, so there's got to be like 800 interviews in it. There's like 37 interviews, because everybody has, their deep dive chapter, because I really wanted to get into the minutia to understand all the things that led up to this, so we can
Mm.
kind of take these experiences and like, what can we do moving forward to help somebody else's loved one who's battling addiction or who's, living with depression, and try to, how can we have the best of Kurt Cobain without having the same tragic ending?
Right, right. Yeah. And I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, unfortunately, just because it's where my brain goes. But
I
as
get it.
far well, I mean, as far as speaking about somebody, I mean, this topic for your book, which I really do like from the little bit that I've been able to read so far, and then I will read the rest for sure. I'm really looking forward to it. Two questions, basically the same, but different perspectives. Like,
Yeah.
so non-fan and fan perspectives, how do you feel like this book, or what do you feel like this book will kind of give to those people?
Um, I did make sure when I was writing it to have non-fan beta readers. The non-fan said that they felt it was about him, but that I used him kind of as the vehicle to discuss larger systemic issues,
Mm,
tying health crisis, lack of affordable health care, depression, substance abuse, all these things. So people, if you don't know anything about Kurt Cobain and you want to read this book, I came into it knowing nothing about him. So I try to have everything perfectly described in the book. So if I mention somebody, from his circle, from his childhood, from whatever, I don't just, use their name and assume that you're reading this because you're a diehard Nirvana fan and you know who that is. I try to texturize it. So
mm,
non can read this and follow along. I think anybody who might just be interested in, you don't even have to be, because Cobain wasn't political, but he was socially, conscious. And if you're interested in that side of things, if you're interested in reading the story about a kid who had a tough start to life, who was able to take all these really all these things stacked against him and rise above, you know what I mean? To have this tenacity and this gumption to really achieve this. I know a lot of people say sometimes like, oh, was it the stars just aligned? I think a little bit with Nirvana was right place, right time. People were ready for this.
hmm
But I think had anybody else fronted the band, I don't think they would have had that kind of success. I think it was him and his experiences, and not even just his experiences. It was the way that he was completely fearless and knew how to convey those experiences to other people, and not in a pompous way or not in a I know more than you way, in a very approachable, even down to the lyrics that I think they have so many, like they're multifaceted and you don't even have to know what he's saying because he really had kind of terrible diction, and like you'll listen to him and you're like, what word did you did say mosquito, okay, you know what I mean? But I think so much of the power of Kurt Cobain was just in that vocal delivery, so you
hmm
can feel what he was feeling without even needing to know what he was saying. He was able to do that. So I think people who might read the book but don't know anything about him, but maybe just are going through something in their lives, I think it might be an uplifting kind of story from the sense of, well, this man basically saw a lot and he still was able to do great things for himself, but more than that, use his platform to do
mm,
good, sort of, widespread societal change. The fans, because I've had some people kind of approach me with this, like it's been, almost 31 years since he died, and there's been a ton of autopsies about his life and his death, and I mean, there's the internet. Why should we care about a book like this? And my answer to people like that, or, and the other question that I get too is, how can you, after all this time, have new information? And my response is, because I asked new questions. But how do
right.
you know you asked new questions if you haven't read existing books? And like, because I talked to people and they were like, oh, this is refreshing. We don't get
Right.
asked these questions.
Well, it's the angle that you're taking. I mean, you wanted to specifically kind of touch on specific things that have been neglected in the past.
Yeah, I just felt it was important to do that. As somebody who knew nothing about the band, but who now is a fan, I
hmm
asked the questions I wanted to know. I didn't want to know about his depression anymore because I had read a lot of the articles online and they just seemed like, how many times can you say water is wet? You know what I mean? Like, okay, the guy was depressed, but a lot of people are. So what can we do to change that for people? What kind of, free resources are available for people? That's why the whole end of the book is free available resources for anybody who might be, going through things or struggling. We also, and I don't think this is explored too much. And I'm hoping that I'm hoping if somebody is a fan of his, that it's somebody who cares about equality,
hmm
because that was who Kurt was. So if someone who cared about him wants to learn really wants to learn more about just how Kurt loved people and cared about people, I hope the book can show them that with some of the stories and examples. I don't think people realize too much how he's often seen as the unsung hero for the gay community. Um,
Mm.
just
Yeah.
the way he acted, how he carried himself. And I thought, well, who better to really shine a light on that than members of the LGBTQ, community. So I have a couple of, writers from the community who are in the book. And, one is this incredible writer. She's a trans woman, and she talked about, what it was growing up like growing up in a religious household and, the difficulties that she had with her family, and how she never felt like she was who she was. You know what I mean?
Right.
She was able to be the person she was. And kind of that depression that comes along with it, and feeling alone and feeling isolated with your thoughts and not sure how to express that to your parents, and then getting turned on to Nirvana at a young age and reading Kurt Cobain's journals at a young age. And basically him being, even deceased, even someone she never met, him being the first person to kind of give her permission to be who she was. And I think that is just incredible now. She's living her best life. She wrote this wonderful article about, what Kurt Cobain meant to her. And I said to her, I said, do you care if I take a snippet of that article and reprint it?
Hmm.
Because I had asked her to write something else for the book, and I was reading it, and you get like upset when you read these things because it's hard to hear their life stories about how they were children feeling, it's just awful, feeling
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And, I don't know.
Inadequate.
Yeah, it was just awful. As a mom, like it just broke my heart to read this. And I said, don't even write anything. I said, I want to just take this and put a part of it in the book. And she was like, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. And then just speaking to Antonino Tati, who is the editor at Cream Magazine, CREAM Magazine. It's in Australia.
Hmm.
Um, and him just talking to me, you know what I mean, about Kurt's impact in the gay community and the duality of so many of Kurt's lyrics. And I think it's a different side of his that isn't often explored. And I don't think you have to be a member of the gay community to find interest in that. I think you can just appreciate that Kurt was a lot of things to a lot of people. And that was something that a lot of people commented on in my book, that he was a bit of a chameleon, and that he kind of knew how to project onto you what you wanted to see.
Mm.
So you and me, let's say we were both friends with him, right? You might know a totally different Kurt than I know. And uh, it even says that Susan even says that in the forward to my book, that she tends not to read books about Kurt because she can't find in the books the Kurt that she knew.
Mm.
And that might be from, you've got certain authors maybe had a different relationship with him than maybe she had. So there does seem to be that. So I asked different questions. I also spoke with different people. I spoke with some people who haven't been interviewed yet.
Hmm.
Um, so I think fans might be able to read something like this and learn something new about him. I didn't want anything sensationalized. So like I said, I tried to keep the questions a lot more muted. If I got any answers that were, you have people that we were just talking for hours. One interview lasted 3 days and 12 hours. And it was a lot. Say things. And if I thought something was a little too private, I didn't put it in the book. And that's kind of why it's got, the slant that it does. Again, this is why it's 500 pages, because
Yeah. No, that's okay. I mean, like, so the base, the gist of it, I feel, is that you've covered a lot of ground thoroughly with the people that you've interviewed, and you have a new takeaway, and I think that that's probably the most important thing for people to know about it going forward, fan or just curious, is that it's going to open up a different perspective on what his life was like, and maybe that's the thing too, what his life was like as opposed to like what we kind of have been given or described about his life through mainstream media.
that's publisher put that. I think they put it on the back of the book. Kurt as he was, not as some needed him to be.
Sure.
So
Well,
I
that's
mean,
great. I mean, that's what
well,
people want.
and that's what I wanted to do, because when I was doing these interviews, I did have a hard time getting some people to want to talk to me. And I had some people who were very adamant at first not wanting to speak to me at all, because they had felt that other writers over the years, I mean, and you're talking everybody and their brothers written articles and books, and you can't like
Hmm. Yeah.
turn around without seeing a new book. And they felt that their words were twisted a lot. And they were kind of like, are you going to twist my words? And I was like, no, I no, I would never in a million years. So what I told everybody in the book, I was like, just I'll send you your chapter for review, and I even told some people too, I was like, do you want to just read the whole book before it goes to print? And and I did have a couple of Kurt's friends sat in and helped me and fact checked it too. So I mean, nothing's from a wiki page. Everything has had people
Yeah.
uh, that's correct, that's correct. You know what I mean? So I hope people appreciate it. I think the bibliography is like 5 pages long or something. There's a ton of fact checking that went into this thing.
Wow.
Um,
Okay. Well, that's great.
I want it to be thorough. I want people to I never got to learn about him as the musician. I became close with some of the people in the book, and I wanted to be respectful because I'm not writing about Kurt Cobain, the lead singer of Nirvana. I'm writing about Kurt Cobain, my friend Carlos's friend, and I wanted to honor that. I've even said this. I think I say it in the book. Like the entire book, I'm calling him Cobain, and about 75% of the book is done, and it shifts in my head, and I'm like, no, I would never call him Cobain to his friends. I address him as Kurt because it just felt more intimate.
Hmm.
Intimate people were being with me, and if they were having that level of vulnerability and trusting me, I was trusting them and telling them about why I wrote the book and Walter. And I did like the find and replace in the whole book, and it just became Kurt. So
Hmm. Yeah. Cool. Well, so you've developed a good relationship with him, I get it seems, and I don't know. I'm really excited to get into the rest of it. What I've read so far has been great. I really thank you for sharing it with me, and I really thank you for reaching out to me in the first place and asking me about, possibly talking about this because I mean, it's a great subject for me. I mean, I'm a big fan. I've and I mean it's the tragic story of his has always been something that has kind of stuck with me, and I like that you're kind of providing a new insight and a new angle on like how to think about his life. Um, so I
yeah,
think from my perspective as a fan, I think it's great, and I really appreciate you doing it, and I'm very happy that you did it, you got through it, you finished it. It's now going to press, and it's going to be out soon.
yeah.
So how do you feel right now that it's done, and now that it's like this close to being released?
You know, so it came out for pre-sale on the 7th of January. So it'll be officially out on Kurt's birthday, the 20th next week.
Uh-huh.
So it was an experience that forced me out of my comfort zone. And now that it's over, I like don't know what to do with myself, like in terms of writing.
Sure.
Um, my publisher's asking me, like, are you gonna start working on something else? But I never wanted to write a book. I just felt like this was a thing I had to do. So I don't really have any ideas for writing anything else.
Mhm.
I want to push this book as much as possible. And it's because I think I'm up to 9 charities now that I'm supporting with it. So
Mm.
that's the whole thing is just trying to get the word out there about it. I'm trying to use the book in other ways to support charities too. Like last summer, I did a virtual writing workshop for charity. And what I did was I used the book as an outline for any other writers to join this virtual 10-week writing workshop. And we went over the book. And I was like, this is how you do dialogue. This is how you could do interviews. This is pitching lit agents, publishers. Like I did a whole, I had my publisher come on and speak to everybody. And I gave
Hmm.
100% of the profits from the writing workshop to charity. I gave them to Camp Victory in Cobain's hometown of Aberdeen, and they provide free summer camp for children who are sexual abuse survivors.
Hmm.
So for me, I have this pressure now that I put on myself. Nobody else puts it on me. That I did this book and I have these places I don't want to let down. So I need to get the word out there to get
Sure.
the funnel to the right places. Like I have a book launch party coming up on March 23rd. We're selling tickets to it. We're giving 100% of the profits that day to Ginny's House, which is a children's advocacy center.
Mm.
Um, so I'm just trying to do all these things. And to me, I really want people to know who the real Kurt Cobain was, as I learned. And I really want people to also know who Walter was and why I wrote this book. And I want to have people get access to the mental health resources in it. So there's just all this pressure I'm putting on myself now.
Okay, I know what that feels like. It's
Yeah.
okay. You're doing good work, and it's
Thank you.
it's you're just about over. You're just about done at this point, so it's good.
I just have to sign
Um,
some or put them in the mail.
well, that's another issue. But
Oh yeah.
so wait, so the release party I thought was the February 20th. Was that wrong?
We had to cancel it. So the Triceratops are playing, and they actually couldn't do that date. And they were so gracious, and they were like, we understand if you have to, find like music or new musicians. And I just thought they were so nice and so awesome that I wanted them to be the band there. And I was like, well, give me another date. We haven't sold tickets yet. And they were like, we're free in March. And I was like, how about March 23rd? So we moved it. I
Oh, okay.
wanted them to be the musicians to play there. They really love Nirvana. They're big Kurt Cobain fans.
I know they are. I talked to them, and actually both of them shared their stories with me about kind of like their we weren't talking about Nirvana, but it got mentioned anyway because it was so important to them.
They're so cool and they're such nice people. And they just really want to be part of this. They know that it's an all volunteer run thing. Like nobody there is making any money. It's at Factory Records in Dover, New Jersey. They donated their venue. I mean, it's Ginny's house is going to be there with volunteers. There are people volunteering to make bracelets to give out for suicide awareness. So it's a whole volunteer
Hmm.
run event. So I was more than happy since we hadn't sold any tickets yet to delay it to make sure that the Triceratops could be there because I
Oh,
just
that's great.
I thought they were just really cool for wanting to do this. They were just
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure they're gonna love it too because they're gonna be covering Nirvana, right?
yeah, they're so funny. They asked me, they're like, would you get on stage and sing Smells Like Teen Spirit? Oh, no. It's like, no, I can't, trust me.
Yeah.
I will collapse from embarrassment. I can't. They're like, but you like you've sang and stuff. I was like, yeah, in a studio with nobody looking at me,
Mm,
and
yeah. All
I
right.
appreciate you want to try to get me to.
That's fine. That's fine. We will forgive you for it, but I think you should if you can. If you muster up the courage, go ahead and do it. It'd be fun. Yeah, but so March 3rd, 23rd, you said.
23rd, it's a Sunday. Yeah. There's tickets on sale right now through Eventbrite. I think if you just Google like Factory Records Kurt Cobain, it comes up.
I'll find it. I'll include it.
I
So
can send
it's
you the link too. Yeah, we're
okay.
hoping we're selling tickets in two batches. So we have the tickets for sale right now, and that's for a show at 3. And then it's a show, and then after the show is over, I'll do a Q&A for anybody who wants to ask any questions, which I still think is kind of funny that people want to ask me questions. I'm
Mm-hmm.
flattered. I'm absolutely flattered. But if we can sell out all the tickets, we'll do a second show after that. And
Okay.
I'm just excited too because this is really cool. So the book has two versions. The paperback, we call it the green cover. It's a picture of Kurt taken in 1991 in Berlin from Gilbert Blechen,
Mm-hmm.
and Gilbert is incredible. And he gifted me that photo to use on the cover, which awesome.
Yeah.
And uh he's letting us use it on a poster. And we're going to be selling the posters at the concert too, which is awesome because we're giving 100% of the profits to Ginny's house. So we're
Cool.
just yeah, really hoping people come out and help us, help them get crucial funds to some really deserving children who need it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean that's the whole point of this book from what I've learned from speaking with you and researching you and the book and so forth is that you're really putting a lot of this towards many other people and many organizations, and so that's a very admirable thing, and I thank you for it.
I appreciate that. When a friend of mine posted about it on Reddit, and I was really stupid because I didn't have any Reddit karma. I didn't even know that was like a thing.
Sure.
Uh,
That's a dangerous move regardless, but okay.
People started commenting, and I was actually surprised at the traction that the post gained. It got like a couple hundred like upvotes, and for the most part, people were really positive. But what I thought was really cool, which really threw me for a loop, was someone that I went to high school with that we hadn't talked in like years. Bought my book and happened to be on the sub and saw somebody kind of throw out some negative comments about it and
Mm,
was like, no, I reached out. I talked to her about it last night. This book is a passion project because the comments I was getting were, this is a cash grab for attention. I was like,
right.
no,
Of course. I mean, it's unavoidable, really.
it is. And I knew that was coming. I will say I do really respect people because once I had posted on there when I got that karma. and some people DM'd me and apologized, which I thought was nice, but I didn't need an apology because the way I look at it is I can understand after 30 years when, just since Kurt's passing, somebody coming out of left field who I don't write for Rolling Stone. I'm not a member of the Seattle grunge community. I don't know anybody, and I've come out with this book, and I can see people kind of being like, okay, what's in it for you? And I'm like, suicide awareness and prevention. I don't know, my husband and kid being proud of me. That's what's in it.
Mm,
I didn't go to school for this. This is not a thing I ever wanted to do. Not that I like have anything against writing books. It's just it wasn't on my radar.
right.
And I told people, I was like, look, it's not that it's anybody's business, but he's mentioned in the book. I said, in 2017, I did lose a family member, Walter, to suicide. And it was nothing that anybody saw coming. It obviously affected me on a profound level. I mean, I know a lot of people find ways of managing and coping with grief, but I'm one of these people where I don't want to not speak comfortably about Walter because I don't remember him for his final moments. I remember him for making fun of me for never having seen Star Wars, as I'm literally sitting in front of two Star Wars posters.
Hmm.
I've decided I've seen it now. Um, but that's who I remembered, and he was a huge
Yeah.
Nirvana fan. And I don't like being vulnerable on platforms like Reddit, but I wanted people to understand, if I say I have new information in this book, it's not new information that's gonna tell you where Kurt was the week he was missing. It's new information like I'm gonna tell you about the time that he helped somebody deliver a litter of kittens. It's not information, they're just nice stories.
Right.
Um,
Well, it's humanizing the person.
and that but that was the whole person I learned about. Like nobody told me anything weird or
But it's
crazy.
great that you found out that information because if it wasn't for you being inquisitive and kind of wanting to do that, then we
I
wouldn't
would
have this information.
if I had asked, why do you think he took drugs? Or was his marriage on the rocks? Or do you think they've had more kids? Like if I had asked those questions, it would have been a different book, but that wasn't where my brain went. I never learned about Kurt Cobain, the rock star. I heard some stories about him like off stage. Like his friend Carlos had told me a story about I forget what the concert was, but Kurt's crowd surfing and Carlos is backstage with management and Kurt, comes backstage and Carlos says he's kind of like visibly rattled and he's missing a shoe and he's talking to Carlos and he's going, they call him Cake. That's Carlos's nickname, Cake. He's going, look at me, Cake, look what they did to me. They're pulling at my hair, they're grabbing at my privates, they're trying to get my wallet, I'm missing a shoe. And it was kind of like, you see things on this grainy footage when you're watching these Nirvana concerts, but then you have a friend telling you Kurt's reaction backstage, you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
it's just all these experiences that humanized him. And I hope everybody in the book knows how grateful I am for them. I am nobody. I am somebody who came out of left field with this. They didn't know if this book was going to get a traditional publishing deal. Actually, when I did these interviews, I told everybody I was self-publishing it because that was my, whole, that was my idea at the time. That's what I thought I was going to do. Um, Somebody like Danny Goldberg didn't have to take the time to do this, but he did. Steve
Right.
Albini in his final interviews, took the time to help me shine a light on mental health awareness in honor of Walter. And I just hope everybody in the book knows how grateful I am to
Yeah.
them. They didn't have to do it. They did. These people
Okay.
are awesome.
Well, if they
So,
heard now, then they do. They do now. And I'm sure that they do. I'm sure. I mean, look, from the time that I've had with you so far, I can tell that you're a genuine person and that you mean well, and obviously you're gonna be true to your word as well. So that's a admirable quality, and I'd like to thank you and thank you
thank you.
for having this
Okay.
talk with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Best of luck
Hope you read
with
the
it.
rest. Hope you read the rest of the book and tell me what you think.
Oh, I will. I will for sure. Trust me. I will. I'm not gonna plow through it like I've been the past few nights, but I will get to it eventually, and I will certainly let you know because I think it's great. I think it's a great topic. I think it's a great idea that you had. I think it's a great angle, and from what I've read so far, it's done very well. So absolutely.
And thank you for having me. I sincerely appreciate it. I've said from the jump, if I only want two things to come from this book. One, I hope it helps one person. I can't bring Walter back. I can't bring Kurt back, but I hope the book somehow can save somebody else's loved one and the people I've met during this.
Mhm.
kindest people. So thank you for having me on. I sincerely appreciate it and taking an interest in my book.
Absolutely. I
Thank you.
thank you.